All right, let's jump right in, shall we? Looks like we're diving into the world of wolves today. You've sent over a really interesting collection of stuff.
Yeah, there's everything here from like basic encyclopedia entries to some pretty recent news articles,
Mhm.
a lot about that wolf debate that's been heating up in Europe.
Oh yeah, I definitely want to get into that. I'm pretty familiar with the basics, but there's always something new to discover with these creatures. It's amazing how much they impact, not just the natural world, but human society as well.
Absolutely. And it looks like you've got sources here that touch on everything from like, their pack dynamics.
Oh yeah, those alpha pairs,
Yeah.
always a bit of a mystery.
To how they actually shape entire ecosystems.
I mean, everybody thinks they know about wolves, but then you read about how big they can get. It's like, whoa.
Right. Not exactly like your average dog. Some of them can reach like 175 pounds.
Seriously.
Yeah, and over 6 feet long. Think about that. Longer than my dining room table.
That's incredible. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around it, like a mini bear running around out there with senses that are like 100 times stronger than ours. I was reading one article about wolves having something like 200 million scent cells. I mean,
Uh,
is that even possible?
It was definitely real.
And
Crucial to their survival,
yeah.
especially during those harsh winters.
Oh, right, right. In those articles about how they hunt in the snow.
Exactly. Think about it. With that many scent cells, they can literally smell prey that's buried under the snow.
Whoa, talk about finding a needle in a haystack. That's next level sniffing. But, while we're on the topic of senses and all, what about we were talking about those alpha pairs earlier. I think there's a lot of like misconceptions about what that actually means.
Right, right. It's not some, constant power struggle
Yeah, yeah.
like you see in like a nature documentary or something.
Yeah,
More
I
like
got it.
it's more nuanced. The alpha pair, they're usually the ones who breed and they kind of guide the pack. But it's not about like brute force.
Mm.
Think of it more like experienced parents.
Ah, so it's more about cooperation than like who's the toughest.
Exactly. Wolves are all about teamwork. They're not lone wolves.
Right. Makes sense. They got to work together to survive, especially when you think about raising those pups and defending their territory and all that. And speaking of which, what about those howls?
Ah, the classic wolf howl.
Yeah, I mean, they're always portrayed as spooky in movies.
Sure.
But, those articles mention it's actually their way of communicating.
Oh, absolutely. It's like their own language.
I mean, what are they saying to each other?
All kinds of things. It's their social media, basically.
Ha ha, wolf Twitter.
They're marking their territory. They're warning each other about danger.
Mm-hmm.
And they even use howls to coordinate during hunts.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much information they can pack into one sound.
It's pretty credible. And it speaks to how social they are.
So it's not just about scaring people camping in the woods.
Not at all.
It's really about staying connected
Yeah.
and working as a team. Which which brings us to their hunting techniques, I guess. We talked about how big they can get. But some of these articles mention wolves taking down prey that's like way bigger than them.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how do they manage that?
Well, forget that image of a lone wolf attacking, right?
Yeah.
It's all about the pack working together.
Mm,
They're incredibly strategic about it. Like, they'll often target a weaker animal in a herd,
right.
and then they just wear it down over time.
I mean, just imagine running for your life for hours, being chased by a pack of wolves. Talk about a workout.
Definitely not for the faint of heart.
No kidding. But I mean, would that take a lot of energy for the wolves too?
It does. They can spend like 8, even 10 hours a day hunting, especially in winter.
Seriously.
Yeah. Their bodies are built for it, though. They've got incredible stamina.
It's amazing how they've adapted to these harsh environments. And that seems to, play a role in their breeding patterns too.
How so?
I read that usually it's just the alpha pair that has pups. And just once a year. Why is that?
Well, that's a great question, and it really highlights how their reproductive strategies are all about, like keeping the pack stable.
Mm.
If you limit the number of pups, it helps control the population size
Mm.
and make sure that the pups are being raised by the most experienced wolves.
So it's all about maximizing those pups' chances of survival.
Exactly. And it also reduces competition for resources within the pack.
Yeah.
So it's a really delicate balance.
Yeah. It makes you appreciate how, like, every single thing they do is connected to the survival of the pack.
Yeah.
But but thinking about survival, we've got to talk about that whole conservation issue. I know wolves were almost wiped out in some areas, but they've made a comeback, right?
Yeah, they have.
Yeah.
Globally, they're classified as least concern. But that doesn't mean that they're not facing challenges.
Especially in certain areas.
Right, like in the U.S., their status can vary a lot,
Uh-huh.
depending on what region you're talking about.
Right. And then there's that whole European situation, which seems to be getting pretty heated.
Oh, absolutely. That's where things get really, really interesting.
Definitely want to dig into that more. But before we move on, I got to ask you about those wolf pup articles. They're like born totally helpless, right?
Oh, yeah.
Blind, deaf, and completely dependent on the pack. Such a contrast to how we imagine those powerful adult wolves.
It is. It's pretty amazing to think about their development.
Yeah.
From those tiny, vulnerable pups to those, apex predators we've been talking about.
So how exactly does that happen? How do they go from those like little fluff balls to, hunting masters?
Well, that is a fascinating journey, and one that I think we should explore in more detail.
Okay, now you've got me hooked. So, listeners, stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive, where we'll get into that European wolf debate and all the challenges of coexisting with these predators. And of course, we'll uncover the secrets of those amazing wolf pups and how they grow into the incredible animals we've been talking about today.
All right, so where do we even begin with this European wolf debate? It's a complicated one, that's for sure.
Yeah, it really is. Like we were saying before, wolves are technically classified as least concern globally.
Right, but when you zoom in on specific regions like Europe,
It's a whole different story.
things get a lot more complex.
And, I've been looking through these news articles, Financial Times, The Times, even AP. It seems like every country over there is dealing with its own wolf-related dilemmas.
Exactly. It's like a perfect example of what happens when you've got a predator species
Right.
that's starting to recover
Yeah.
in areas where, humans have also kind of expanded their presence.
And in this case, it's not just about, competition for space, right? We're talking about real conflicts.
Oh, absolutely.
Farmers losing their livestock.
Yeah, and that's a huge deal. I mean, we
Yeah.
can't downplay the impact it has on people's livelihoods, their emotions, their whole way of life.
Right. It's not just about the economics of it either. I mean, these are people who are, caring for these animals. It's got to be devastating.
And those articles you sent, they really highlight that. The anxieties, the frustrations that farmers are feeling.
I mean, I get it. If you're seeing your sheep or your cattle being killed,
Right.
it's hard to see wolves as anything other than, a threat.
And so, a lot of them, they're calling for some kind of population control.
Yeah. Culls, controlled hunts, things like that.
Exactly. And from their perspective, it makes sense.
Right.
But then you've got the conservationists,
Right.
and they're looking at the bigger picture,
The whole ecosystem.
the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they're saying, hold on, wolves are actually really important for the balance of things.
Right, right. The whole keystone species idea. Can you remind us what that means again? How does that apply to this situation in Europe?
Sure. One of those articles, I think is from the Times, had a really good analogy. They talked about, imagine an archway.
Okay.
And the keystone is it's that wedge-shaped stone at the very top, the one that holds the whole structure together.
Right.
Wolves are like that keystone. They're keeping things in check.
By controlling the prey populations, right?
Exactly. Deer, elk, mainly.
Mm.
And when you control those populations, you prevent overgrazing, which then has this ripple effect. It impacts the vegetation, it impacts smaller animals,
The soil even.
even the soil. Yeah.
So it's not just about the wolves and the deer. It's about like everything connected to them.
Right. It's a whole web of life.
Yeah.
And so the conservationists, they're saying, these culls might seem like a quick fix,
Yeah.
but in the long run, they could really backfire. They could really mess things up.
So what's the alternative? I mean, I know you mentioned some non-lethal methods earlier. Guard dogs, fencing, stuff like that.
Yeah, those can be pretty effective, actually.
Really?
Yeah, especially when you implement them properly. You adapt them to the local conditions.
So it's not just about like throwing up a fence and hoping for the best.
No, it's got to be strategic.
Yeah.
You gotta think it through. Like take guard dogs, for example. Their presence alone can deter wolves.
Interesting. So it's not necessarily about them like attacking the wolves?
No, it's more about like, being a presence, a buffer.
Oh, I like that. Like giving the sheep their own their own furry security detail. But what about the fencing? I mean, can't wolves just jump over a fence?
Some can, yeah.
Yeah.
But, electric fencing, well, it's not perfect.
Right.
It can be a pretty good deterrent. and especially when you combine it with other methods.
Right, right. The guard dogs, maybe some herding strategies.
Exactly. It's about creating like multiple layers of protection.
Makes sense. And then, of course, there are those compensation programs, right, to help farmers who've, lost livestock.
Yeah, that's another piece of the puzzle.
How do those work? I mean, what's the idea behind them?
Well, it varies depending on the country,
Right.
but basically it's about providing, financial support to farmers who've had losses. So it kind of helps offset the economic burden.
Right, right. Because obviously that's a huge factor for a lot of these farmers.
Yeah. And it also kind of incentivizes them to adopt those non-lethal methods we were talking about.
So it's not just about like punishing the farmers or eradicating the wolves. It's about finding ways for both to exist.
Yeah, finding that middle ground, finding that balance.
And that seems to be, the core of this whole debate, right? I mean, it's not really about wolves being bad or farmers being, unreasonable.
No, it's way more nuanced than that.
It's about this clash between, historical factors
Right.
and ecological changes and economic realities.
It's about how we live with nature. How we share space.
And finding solutions, it sounds like, requires everyone to kind of shift their perspective a bit,
Yeah.
to move away from that us versus them mentality.
And that's tough, It's a lot easier said than done.
But I mean, some areas have had success with it, right? Like community-based programs
Oh yeah, definitely.
where people are actually coming together, talking things through.
Yeah, finding solutions that work for everyone.
It sounds like that's kind of the key. Collaboration,
A collaboration.
open communication, and a willingness to try different things.
Exactly. And it's not just about wolves. This is a lesson that applies to so many areas of our relationship with nature.
That's a really good point. I mean, it's about how we choose to coexist with the wild world around us, and that brings us to those wolf pups. I mean, after talking about all these big complex issues,
Right.
I'm kind of ready for some cuteness overload.
All right. Well, get ready. Because those pups, their development is truly amazing.
I'm still blown away by how helpless they are when they're born.
Oh, yeah.
Blind, deaf, completely dependent on the pack.
Those first few weeks, it's all about survival. They're just huddled in that den, relying on their parents, their pack members for everything. Warmth, food, protection.
It sounds almost peaceful in a way.
It is. It's this little world of care and nurturing.
Like a furry little kindergarten.
Haha, exactly. But things change quickly, Those pups, they grow up fast.
Yeah, I read that they're already exploring outside the den by like 3 weeks old.
Yeah.
3 weeks! That's incredible!
Their development it's really rapid. Their eyes open, their ears open, they're starting to walk around, they're exploring, they're so curious about everything.
I mean, can you imagine like suddenly being able to see and hear
Right.
and smell all these new things? It must be like an explosion of sensory input.
Oh, it definitely is. It's
Yeah.
a period of intense learning and socialization too.
So they're figuring out how to be a wolf, basically.
Yeah, exactly. They're watching the adults. You're mimicking their behavior. It's like they're downloading all the wolf software.
Haha, the wolf operating system. I love that.
And the adults, they're really active in this process. It's not just about providing food and shelter. They're actively teaching the pups.
Oh, that's interesting. And what about those rendezvous sites I was reading about? What are those exactly?
So as the pups get a little older, a little more mobile, the pack will often move to these rendezvous sites. They're usually like secluded meadows, forest clearings, places like that.
Oh, okay.
And it's like their outdoor classroom.
Yeah.
It's a safe space for the pups to practice their skills.
So the Lyles they'll bring food back to these sites.
Yeah, yeah. And the pups, they get to watch.
Okay.
They get to participate in the feeding process. And they also do a lot of play fighting there.
So it's like a mix of observation and hands-on experience.
Exactly. And play. Play is so important for their development. It helps them hone their hunting techniques, their social skills, all of that.
So it's not just the parents who are involved in this teaching process.
No. It's a whole pack effort.
Really?
Oh yeah. Older siblings, aunts, uncles, they all chip in.
It really is a village. And I'm curious, about the role of the alpha pair in all this.
hmm
Is it strictly the parents' responsibility, or does the whole pack kind of help raise the pups?
It's definitely a shared responsibility. It's a real testament to how cooperative wolf packs are.
Mm.
The alpha pair, they obviously play a primary role in breeding in those early weeks of care, but other pack members, especially those who are related to the pups,
Right.
they often step in. They'll help with feeding, with grooming, with babysitting even.
That's amazing. It's like a built-in support system.
Exactly. It's about ensuring the survival of the pups.
Right.
Even if something happens to the parents, it's really remarkable.
So we've got these pups, they're learning, they're growing, they're surrounded by this incredible support system. But when does the real adulting begin?
Well, that transition usually starts around 6 to 8 months of age.
Okay.
That's when they start to participate more actively in hunting, in defending their territory.
So it's like they're graduating from Wolf Academy
Yeah.
and they're entering the workforce. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's during this time that their individual personalities, their strengths, really start to come out.
Oh, interesting. So some pups might be really good at tracking, while others might be better at taking down prey.
Exactly. Or some might be really good at caring for younger pups.
So there's no like one size fits all approach to wolf adulthood.
No, not at all. Each wolf brings something unique to the pack.
I mean, it makes you wonder what happens to the pups who don't quite fit in. Maybe they don't have the same hunting instincts,
Right.
or they're not as good at socializing. Do they get left behind?
It's rare, but sometimes a young wolf will actually disperse.
Disperse.
Yeah, they'll leave the pack and try to find their own territory. Maybe even start a pack of their own. And this helps prevent inbreeding. It helps keep the gene pool diverse.
So it's not necessarily a bad thing?
No, not at all. It's just another way of being a wolf.
Another path.
Another path.
It's pretty incredible. We've talked about so much today. I mean, everything from their biology to their conservation, their hunting skills.
And those adorable pups.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's really given me a whole new appreciation for these animals.
It's been great exploring all this with you.
And to our listeners, keep exploring, keep learning. There's so much more to discover about these amazing creatures. I mean, they really are a testament to the power of nature.
Absolutely. They remind us that we're all connected,
Yeah.
and that we need to find ways to live in harmony with the wild world around us.
All right, so we've talked about the challenges, the controversies, but now I'm ready for something a little more, well, heartwarming. Those wolf pups.
Yeah, let's dive into that. Their journey from those helpless newborns to those incredible hunters it's remarkable.
I keep thinking about those articles you shared. I mean, they're born blind and deaf, totally dependent on the pack. It's hard to picture, when you think about those powerful adults.
It's a huge contrast, isn't it? Those first few weeks, it's all about survival. They're huddled in the den, relying on their parents, their pack members for everything: warmth, food, protection.
It sounds almost cozy in a way, like a little furry nursery.
It is. It's this incredible little world of care and nurturing. But, things change pretty quickly as they start to grow.
Oh, yeah. One article mentioned them exploring outside the den by 3 weeks old.
That's right. 3 weeks. Their development it's super fast. Their eyes open, their ears open, and suddenly they're taking in all this new information: sights, sounds, smells.
I mean, that's got to be overwhelming, right? To go from 0 to 60 like that, sensory-wise.
It is. It's this period of intense learning and socialization.
Mm-hmm.
They're forming bonds with their siblings, with other pack members, and they're starting to mimic the behaviors of the adults.
So they're literally learning how to be a wolf.
Exactly. They're observing, they're imitating. It's like they're downloading the wolf operating system.
I love that analogy. And so the adults, they're actively involved in this process.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not just about providing, food and shelter. They're actively teaching these pups the skills they need to survive.
That's amazing. And you mentioned these rendezvous sites earlier. What exactly are those?
So as the pups get a little older, a little more mobile, the pack will often move to these rendezvous sites. They're usually in a secluded meadow or a forest clearing.
Okay, and what's the purpose of that?
It's like their outdoor classroom, basically.
Okay.
A safe space for the pups to to practice those skills they've been learning.
Ah, so the adults will bring food back to these sites.
Exactly. And the pups, they get to watch, they get to participate in the feeding process, and they'll even do some play fighting there.
Oh, so it's a mix of observation, hands-on experience, and good old-fashioned play.
Yeah, exactly. And play is so important for their development. It helps them hone their hunting techniques, their social skills, all of that.
So it's really a team effort then, not just the parents who are teaching these pups.
Oh no, it's a whole pack effort. Older siblings, aunts, uncles, they all get involved. It takes a village.
It really does. And thinking about the whole pack structure, what about the role of the alpha pair specifically? Is it mainly their responsibility to raise the pups?
Well, it's definitely a shared responsibility.
Yeah.
The alpha pair, they have a primary role, of course, in breeding and in those early weeks of care. But other pack members will often step in to help.
So they're not just off doing their own thing, they're actively involved in raising the next generation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially the relatives of the pups, they'll help with feeding, with grooming, even with babysitting.
It's like a built-in support system.
Exactly. And it's crucial to the survival of the pups. Even if something were to happen to the parents, the pack is there to step in. It's a
Yeah.
pretty incredible system.
It really is. So we've got these pups, they're learning, they're growing, they've got this incredible support system. But when does the real adulting begin? When do they go from, students to actual contributing members of the pack?
Well, that transition typically starts around 6 to 8 months of age.
Okay.
That's when they start to participate more actively in hunting, in defending their territory.
Yeah.
They're not just playing around anymore.
Right, right. It's like they're graduating from Wolf Academy and entering the workforce.
Exactly. And it's during this time that their individual personalities and strengths really start to shine.
Oh, that's interesting. So some pups might be really good at tracking while others are better at taking down prey.
Exactly. Or some might be, particularly good at caring for the younger pups.
So there's no like one size fits all approach to being a wolf.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Each wolf brings something unique to the pack. And that's part of what makes them so successful.
And what about those pups who maybe don't quite fit in? Maybe they don't have those strong hunting instincts or they're not as good at socializing. What happens to them?
Well, it's rare, but sometimes a young wolf will choose to disperse. They'll leave the pack and try to find their own territory.
Wow, so they just strike out on their own.
Yeah, they might try to join another pack or even start their own. And this dispersal behavior actually helps prevent inbreeding, so it's good for the species overall.
So it's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just another path they might take.
Exactly. It's another way of being a wolf.
Well, we've covered so much ground in this deep dive. It's really been incredible. We talked about, their biology, their conservation, those incredible hunting skills, the heartwarming journey of the pups. I mean, it's given me a whole new appreciation for these animals.
Me too. It's been amazing exploring all of this with you.
And to our listeners, keep exploring, keep learning. There's always more to discover about these fascinating creatures. And I think they really have a lot to teach us about the power of nature, about the importance of family, about finding our place in the world. I mean, wolves, they really are incredible animals.
They really are. And thanks to those amazing sources you sent over,
Yeah,
we've all learned so much more about them today.
absolutely. So until next time, happy exploring, everyone.